So Eva and Dave, long-term friends. So it's nice to actually have you on the Cloud and Fire podcast. And I thought we'd start with some quick fire questions, icebreakers. You guys don't know I'm going to ask you this. Right. So here's the first question. Who is more organized between you?
Oh, me.
Definitely.
By a mile. 5 million miles.
I always have a joke that Eva has a box for boxes. So every thing in the box, she has a box for the box.
Okay. And who would be the first person to apologize?
Think so?
Yes.
Maybe? Yeah, okay.
No, 100%. I'm never wrong. Really, either.
Okay. And what surprised you most about each other before marriage?
I'm terrible with these.
What surprised me most? But Dave actually spoke. He was so quiet. He ignored me for a while.
Dave told me that was intentional.
I was surprised Dave asked me out in the first date.
Yeah, fun fact.
Okay, and one final question. One word you would use to describe each other. So starting with you, Eva.
We're doing this nice. We're doing this.
Yes, thank you.
Supportive.
Are you saying that you're supportive or Dave is supportive?
No, he's supportive. Yeah.
Okay. Right, Dave, you're going to have to up your game here.
Well, I said bubbly there, but I'll have to go a bit better than that.
Bubbly.
It's even not bubbly. It's just not the perfect word.
Eva is bubbly, but as her husband, I would have thought of something a bit more.
This is like when I say to him, Dad, like, all right, and he goes, yeah, you're nice. Of all the words you could do.
Lovely.
So good. So listen, that was really fun. Let's chat a bit about the beginning of your stories. I know you guys, we've been kind of long-term friends for quite a while, but after kind of chatting to you guys and hearing your different backgrounds, it was really interesting to me to hear how God has worked so incredibly individually in your lives and in your hearts. So Eva, what was it like growing up in your home?
I would say as a young child, I had a great childhood and home life. There was no issues there. I grew up in a home where my mum was saved and my dad was a backslider. Um, and then I have an older sister and things who's all saved, or like her and her husband, granny's and grandma's all saved. So from that perspective, as a very young child, it was great. It was happy. We didn't know, myself and my younger sister Shan didn't know there was any differences. Really, although my dad didn't go to church, didn't profess to be a Christian, we were always encouraged to go to church, go to Sunday school, go to GB. And mum really made that her mission to make sure we did those things. We never missed out on anything. She made sure we had every opportunity in life. So from a really young age, it was great. Like I never knew had any issues. I suppose I always knew that there was a difference, how to put this, in my home life in a sense of my parents both weren't saved as a comparison to some of my friends' parents who were. And I could see some strains on my mum from that perspective, but it didn't really, transfer down to us until we kind of got a bit older. She made it her life mission to just, make the marriage work, make sure that Shan and I were exposed to Christ in everything, that at home we were happy, at home we were stable. But it was her providing all of that, now that I look back. And then later down the line, home life changed, and they divorced, they separated. And I suppose there was so much, maybe we'll get into that a bit more, that made home life tricky. But my mum made sure it was still a safe place when it was just the three of us, if that makes any sense. So early years great, early years fine, and then it just maybe got a bit harder as I got older.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack that, and it's a real turning point in your story, which we'll talk about. But on the other side, Dave, what was your kind of upbringing like? Yours is a bit different, right?
Yeah, I suppose like I grew up in probably like the ultimate Christian sort of community background. Mum and dad were saved, grandparents were saved. My granda Jackson, dad's side, he was a on churches preaching and singing and everything, and ran a children's group with hundreds of kids that went to it, and every year there's loads of kids getting saved out and things, so really sort of grew up in that sort of a culture, sort of really in the faith, I was very very blessed for that, um, and even in the small community I grew up in, sort of country sort of school and things like that, everybody was Christian, and it's such a blessing, so it was, and that's where
Yeah.
where it
Yeah.
came from.
No, definitely. And then when we pivot back to Eva, what was the role that church and faith plays in your early childhood? Did you mention that your mom, she was a saved woman, she really took steps to create that Christian ethos. But what did that look like in an everyday?
Well, I suppose in like even very simple terms, we were at church every Sunday. She ran one of the Sunday schools for our church. So we were there every Sunday too. I seen her preparing for that during the week, praying about that. And we went to GB, any like jam club, Jesus and Me, I don't know if anybody else went to those things. We just were at all those types of clubs that really, really, really involved in everything. I grew up in a wee village, so same kind of thing. The school was very Christian ethos, we were always involved in different churches and stuff. That was real, real blessing growing up in that way in school. So for me, everything was just about Jesus, which is lovely, and I think I probably took that for granted, although I was only little and maybe didn't understand how precious that was. Although I had a home where there was one parent saved and one parent not, prayer was not a stranger to me, worship was definitely not a stranger to me. It wasn't just even like God, or like this scary God, it was like Jesus and the love of Jesus and a relationship with Jesus. And Jesus wasn't just like a story figure. He was very much this real person. Um, so faith was very, very obvious to me. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 5 or 6. I remember that moment very clearly with mom. Um, but yeah, it was everything. I was that child that like argued the corner of like why Jesus is real, and why Jesus loves you. Um, so yeah, it was no stranger, and it just took place in everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah. So really growing up, church was a real part of your life. It was more of a relationship but there was something happening underneath with everything going on at that time and going into your teenage years. There was something that I guess you were going through that not many people would have understood or knew about at the time. So do you want to unpack that?
Yeah. So I'd mentioned before that home life changed for me whenever I became a teenager, and that was because my parents separated whenever I was like 13 and a half, something like that. Um, it wasn't the smoothest journey. Um, Unfortunately, that relationship with my dad completely broke down, but it wasn't instantly. It was over a period of years, really all my teen years, like 13 right up to 18. It was a very unsettled time. Um, a lot happened. Sometimes I can't say 'cause other people involved in it, but it wasn't normal. It wasn't normal divorce. It wasn't normal for kids to go through those things. It wasn't nice to see my mum go through things that happened. And I was obviously in school at that time. Um, and I would say, you know, there was a lot of hurt and things that he did on us, things he did to my mom, things he did on our older sister, and we were really having to deal with that as young children. Mom was trying to deal with something that she had dealt with in the behind the scenes for years that was now coming to light in front of us as kids. And she was trying to still take on that hurt while protecting her kids. And then we were seeing our other older sister who has a different dad just be hurt as well for also protecting us. So it was a real mess and I really, really struggled with that. I was very close to my dad as a young child. So, going from somebody who I felt was like this really cool dad that was like a protector who, took us places, took care of us, to kind of somebody that was willing to put himself first and not his kids, I found that really hard. Um, I was a female teenager and they're not very nice girls, growing up in the teenage years. And I went through that phase of having friends and friends falling out and then making up again and new friends. And what I really found was I had to grow up very quickly compared to a lot of these other people. And they didn't really know how to deal with that. I was this kind of weird girl whose parents weren't not only divorced, um, but there was a lot of other baggage. I was coming out of classes in secondary school to kind of get like a counseling type thing with other teachers. It was really intense, and I know other people go through far worse things. But it still wasn't normal for the typical child to go through. And that went really happened from I was like third, fourth year. So like predominantly through my GCSEs and my A level time. And what really happened to me, I suppose, is that I felt very lonely. Um, I became very aware that I I was hurting, but so were the other people around me in my family, and I kind of felt if I expressed that I was putting more burden on them, or tensions were very very tight at the time and heightened, so that if you express one emotion, somebody else was upset as well, and I just then kind of became a bit of a recluse with my emotions. Like internally I really struggled, and I was very 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 hurt, and that kind of showed itself into things of like self-image then, confidence. I really struggled, just with schoolwork. And then it had an effect on my relationship with God. And I don't know if we'll kind of get into that a bit more down the line, but yeah, it just over those years, it kind of went from being so smooth sailing and a lovely life, to one that was just felt like heartache, 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 and I just felt like I was constantly being punished for something, um, and I wasn't the bad person in it, and all those other people around me who weren't saved and who were growing up in households with parents who didn't have a relationship with Christ, they were still together and they were happy, and I just felt like our life was falling apart. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that was just the emotion of me as a teenager, because then when I looked at my mum and my older sister and family members, they were just like so steadfast in Christ, like this is nothing, like he's got us, and I just couldn't see that at the time.
Yeah, yeah. That's quite a lot to unpack,
Yeah.
and we could probably like chat a lot more, and we will chat a lot more about what was going on at a deeper level. But if we pivot back to Dave, you had a very different kind of teenage year. Like we chatted before, you received at 8, you were brought up in a Christian home. Um, Everything was kind of tick box. But you were involved in a lot more quote unquote church things. And you're probably going to tell us a bit more about the Bible smuggling, which is quite interesting to hear. I'm not sure if that's criminal, but yeah, let's chat about that.
Yeah, so like I grew up, yeah, so like I was probably that ultimate sort of Christian. It's probably the way Eva was going, maybe until she got sidetracked. But in
I'm just
school,
going to stop you there because I've heard you say ultimate Christian quite a lot
Like
throughout this whole
a
episode. We'll unpack that later, but carry on.
um, yes, was the ultimate.
superhero.
um, yeah, no, so yeah, so I grew up, so all the way through school, I was the guy probably who was, you know, really picking fights and religious education about, defending Christ. And in physics class, I was, arguing with the teacher. And geography, I remember getting kicked out because I disagreed with the age of the Earth and all that sort of stuff. So I was really, I probably went really almost too much in that sort of way at times, where, I didn't have even many friends who weren't Christians. And if you weren't a Christian, I almost wouldn't have been that friendly towards you as well, because I was almost scared of somebody who wasn't a Christian. Which looking back was really silly, and it was me probably trying to protect myself. I was so conscious to not go off the rails, or not to do that maybe I went too much the other way and wasn't actually that friendly towards non-believers many times, and maybe I was too aggressive as a teenager growing up. But you learn these things as you grow. Um, and then in church, then I got involved in different mission trips and doing different things. I suppose I did all the standard ones where you go to the Czech Republic, you hear a lot of people doing kids clubs and stuff like that. And then, yeah, I did Bible smuggling one year, which probably sounds much cooler than what it is. To be fair, yes, it probably is illegal in those countries, but I don't know. I don't imagine the Vietnamese government are going to come and arrest me, but you never know. Yeah, but it was basically communist countries out in Southeast Asia, so Vietnam and Laos. If you go, those are communist countries. You're not allowed to be a Christian there. But as a Westerner coming into those countries, they give you certain exemptions and will treat you differently to somebody who's a citizen of those countries. So basically, we as Westerners were allowed. We brought in big, massive rucksacks full of Bibles just across land borders into those two countries. And then just you give them out to people in the local church there, and that they met us and just took all the Bibles. And the risk for us, it sounds much more dramatic. I don't think anybody's ever gone to prison who's been caught. But if you were a Vietnamese person bringing them in, you would go to prison for a long time for that. But as a Westerner, the risk isn't as bad. Although, having said, when you're out there, there was one Sunday in particular, we went to one of the underground churches in Laos, and that was exceptional. You think as Christians, we can't be bothered going to church when it's sunny, or whatever. But those guys are literally taking, big risk, and if they're caught there, they go to prison for quite a long time. And they had us up the front singing songs and then all sort of stuff, and we are didn't really know each other, but it was an amazing experience. So it was, and
Yeah.
there's people, real Christians out there. So there is.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And there's such a contrast between both your stories. Dave, you were very outward and active in your Christian faith, being challenged through service and ministry. But on the other side, Eva, you were still going through some internal struggles emotionally and mentally. Maybe you want to unpack a bit more what the pressures and the weights that you were carrying. You kind of mentioned feeling a wee bit like, you didn't want to trouble your family and trouble those who were close to you. But how did that make you feel? Why was that such a pressure on your life?
Um, I suppose I grew up with a mummy who is very strong. She's an amazing woman. She loves the Lord so much, and everything she does, it's had behind it first, every decision. I'd never seen her break down and cry over being worried about something. I've never heard her talk anxiously. She's always just been this really strong pillar, in my life. And I think whenever, these certain things happened, and I realized how much she had hurt for so long, that really hurt me. And I just couldn't get my head around that. And then, especially when it affected my sisters too, we're very, very close. I really, really struggled. And then I just didn't want to share that with them. I suppose I'm being really honest as well. I said that I felt lonely, and I definitely did. And I think it's okay to still have a very close bubble and to feel lonely. I wouldn't be embarrassed to say that to them. How I felt was different to them, and they didn't always understand that. I definitely had a closer relationship with my dad, maybe than what my younger sister had. She was a bit closer to my mum. And, that would have affected me very differently than it affected her. Not that one was worse than the other or whatever, and yeah, I just couldn't get my head around it. For me, it wasn't this like evil, bad person. It was just somebody that was supposed to love me and protect me that had hurt me. And whenever I realized that my friendships were breaking down, but felt like my family was breaking down, um, and everything else kind of went with that, I just then closed off. And I just remember feeling like I was constantly walking about with like thoughts in my head and weight in my chest. I remember always being in the bus on my way home and being so terrified of what was gonna, what message was gonna come through that night, or what was gonna happen. And I kind of, although I held that in, very inward for a long time and didn't express how I felt, it then affected how I was outwardly towards
Mm,
my family. And I was a very angry teenager at times. It definitely put a strain on my relationship with my mum. And I take full responsibility for that. I'm definitely not perfect in that. But it was very, very, very hard. And what that weight then did was I just couldn't see Christ in it, which is really sad to admit, but I just could not understand like why I had this woman who was so faithful through, all these years of marriage where she was hurt, be then hurt more, why were us as children being hurt, why were, and in my head it was like we were all children of God, and I just felt like he wasn't there in the midst of the fire at all. That really affected me. And I suppose I then backslid at like 15, 16, but I hate that term because I never knew how to explain that to anybody. I told my family like I didn't believe in God anymore, but that just wasn't true. I couldn't see him. I couldn't feel him. I couldn't, I didn't know where he was. I didn't, and I just felt so alone. And really it was because I was just putting myself first in that circumstance, in a sense of I just cared about how I felt. So what I did then was I just tried to fill this huge gap with other things, hobbies, new friends, and relationships, like just everything that just wasn't Jesus and wasn't my family. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I guess, things were building um emotionally, but really your world was crashing. And compared to Dave, where Dave was, I guess, in Christian circles, succeeding, the typical Christian boy, ultra Christian, as you said a few times. um, but I just lost my train of thought. Um, when did you start to feel, Eva, that you were reaching a point of emotional strain? Like, where was the break point in your teenage years?
um I think the main I think I think where it became really evident to me is that I went through A levels, really struggled. I loved school. Like I'm a teacher now. I loved school, but I couldn't focus at that point. It came way down the pecking order. Didn't do as well as what I'd hoped. Didn't get into Strand first time, so I decided to take a year out. And that year, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was so lost, so lonely. I'd gotten into a relationship at that point, and you know, it it was really just to fill a void. And I suppose the relationship that I kind of get in and the friendships I had at that time were with people who weren't saved, but their life seemed great, because they'd no struggles. So I just felt like this was the answer. Whenever I did go to church, mum still asked me to go with her until I was 18. So people like Dave, the ultra Christians, they actually irritated me. But not in a like
Dave irritates me as well. So
I know it's they just seemed great. I was so jealous to the point like it was really bad. It's true. Like I was so jealous of how badly I wanted that. Um and that used to make me really angry, like going, I just, why are they so happy and yes, like I wanted to be at the well on a Saturday night and why do they not have any bother? Like they're Christians too. And that really started to build up inside me at like a certain year. I was like 19 and I then got this job with your wife Joanna in the same place that she worked. And I didn't know that was like a God moment. I thought it was just this was like luck. And that really shaped me. I really fully believe like there's no coincidences with God, and that's why Joanna and I have the friendship we have now. But like she was this girl in amongst all these other people that weren't Christians, and I remember one day she was quite quiet, um, and she just started talking about going to church, and then I heard her mother and father-in-law, which is your mum and dad, had went to my family church, and I remember that really stirred something inside me because like this, I go to Whitewell, this workplace was in Donegal, like it was a good while away, so like I couldn't believe that somebody else had went there. And just things that she was saying, I was very much in like this phase of life where whoever I was around, I changed my personality to fit them because I just didn't know who I was. And I felt really relaxed with Joanna. And I remember going home one day and being very like, oh, I quite enjoy being in the room with her, like what's going on, and like looking forward to it. She probably thought I was a real weirdo because we had like 10 personalities, but there was just something about it, something changed, and that worked on me. It was maybe a wee while into the job, but it was a solid year that really ate at me, and it kind of made me question like, she's talking about going to, a church thing tonight. She was getting ready for doing the children's ministry, and that was kind of things I was always thinking like, I want to be doing that. I want to be doing that. Um, and anyway, so it kind of went on. That started eating, eating, eat. And then I remember in the relationship that I was in, I ended up getting engaged. And I think I kind of, I just went with it because I was like, this is my life. You know, I chose this. Um, I very much believe it, you know, in not just silly relationships and trying to make it work. And that was what I wanted because that wasn't the marriage my parents had. But the second that happened, more God moments like started to come into place in a very short space of time. So that was like the November or something. And over the space of like 3, 4 months, random people were like stopping me and saying things. I was being invited to different churches. Um, you know, I was worrying about something the night before, and maybe it was like an internal prayer. I don't know. I was worrying about it next day. Somebody was answering it, and it was things like that were going on and on and on. And our relationship slowly started to build with like Joanna a bit more. And I then was so desperately unhappy in the relationship that I was in. I was starting to like, I felt like I was going to combust because there was like a part of me was like wanting to go one way because I knew that God was working and I started to acknowledge that that was God. But then, yeah, I was pulling the other direction. And I then, for me, it was March, that I came back to the Lord, and I just remember one night sitting there being like, "I can't do this. Like, I don't want this marriage. I don't want this life. I don't want these friendships. Like, I need to feel whole. Like, I'm so desperately unhappy.
And this
Like,
was on Mother's Day, right?
this was a Mother's Day. Yeah, sorry. And like, I don't know. It's just that I was literally just lying in bed, you know, and I'd been to church that morning with mum and nothing sparked it, and I just began to cry uncontrollably, like, it just felt like the weight was literally sitting on me, and I couldn't breathe, and I was, like, really hyperventilating, crying, and in that moment, it was just like there's, like, the Lord been like, "Come to me, you know, it's gonna get better, like, come to me," and there was no, like, dramatic, you know, big thing. I was literally in my pajamas with the iPad propped up watching TV, crying, and I just asked the Lord, like, you know, "Forgive me, like, come back to my life," and that very second, from that emotional breakdown where that stream just snapped, um, I like, I know people say they feel a weight lift, but like I literally felt something like lift a weight off my chest. And that made me like hyperventilate and more crying because I couldn't believe like that, you know, it was that easy. Like that was what I was missing. Like that was all I needed. It was Jesus. Like he was everything. And in that very second that I acknowledged him, you know, where I thought I that he'd abandoned me, but really I'd abandoned him, it was gone. He'd taken everything away. And it was incredible. Like that moment was incredible.
A real roller coaster, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
so to bring Dave back in the picture, how do you feel, or how when you heard that story first, um, about Eva and her real encounter with God? What were your thoughts about it? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, well, I remember our first was it probably would have told me on our first date, would you? Our first time out,
Maybe,
maybe.
yeah.
Um, just thinking like, wow, you know, because I suppose you know, even as a Christian, like even I didn't meet until I was 20, 28,
Mm,
27,
okay.
something like that. And you know, I suppose I'd been on the road a good while, and it's amazing to hear that God does these things, you know. And I'd known Eva for a long time, really casually, in a sense of there's that person that comes to our church sometimes. And I knew who her mum was, and I knew, you know, things like that sort of thing, and Facebook friends for a long time, you know, like that sort of stuff. You catch up and know things. Um, you know, and I always knew a wee bit about her story as well, that, you know, her mum and dad had been divorced and whatever, and you should and had been coming to church and then wasn't and stuff. And it was just amazing to hear that God still does those things, you know. And then, of course, then for us, then the relationship developed, you know, which was amazing.
So really, you know, Eva, from that moment, it was a real moment of surrender. Um, but it wasn't just a reset; it was kind of a rebuild as well.
Yeah.
And Dave kind of alluded to it, but the months that followed, that rebuilding began to kind of take place in practical ways. Cue Mr. Dave Jackson. So tell us a bit about that, how you guys first meet, and as a bonus question to it, um, when did you both realize this might be something that God was leading?
Well, suppose we met. Like, well, we didn't know each other. We both grew up in Whitewell. Dave stayed there all through his teenage years, so He's an identical twin, so like that was what I knew Dave as, one of the twins. And he was good friends with my cousin, so I kind of knew like of him that way. And then I guess the year, so that when very day I came back to the Lord, that's kind of like a real pivotal moment of that was the next day lockdown was announced. And I remember that was class for me because I was like, I have all this time to build this relationship with God. And this is where it's like, again, not a coincidence, but because I'd come out of a relationship with somebody, I was just like, it was a moment of surrender. Like, God, I want you to take everything here. Like, we're in a lockdown. Like, life's good. It's sunny. Like, the only relationship I cared about was like me and God. And I was like, see, everything that's come my way, job, uni, um, and like relationships again. Like, I don't want another relationship until it's my husband, and that's it. Like, I don't care, and I'm not going to look for it. I just want you to bring him to me, and that's it. And for me, kind of what happened, I remember Shannon and I, my sister, we that was in March. So obviously church was in lockdown. It must have been like the August or something that
Mm-hmm.
we opened up again for youth.
Mm-hmm.
And Shan and I went, and it was the first night we'd been there in years. And we were a wee bit hesitant because we weren't sure who'd be there, And I remember being really emotional during the worship, and in that moment praying, being like, I really would love somebody to marry who I can worship with, who'll lead me in this way and do that. And then I vaguely kind of was supposed to Dave that night, spotted him, like seen him like fully like surrendered in worship that night. And then I kind of led. There was loads of wee moments where you're kind of bumping into each other. That's how it kind of happened for me, how we met, I suppose, just all those wee moments that built up. And then one night I was in my car outside church before the service on my own. Um I was singing again, worship days 'cause I was dancing, so it must be very Pentecostal. And he just got into the car and we had a chat, and that was kind of really it then, wasn't it?
Yeah. Did,
Yeah.
did he ask you for singing lessons? Because Dave can't sing to save his life.
I can't tell you, that's where we work well.
Mark, I thought you were going to invite me to sing with you someday.
No, man, no. Two bad singers, it wouldn't be a good mix, But yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably one thing they also mentioned. You mentioned that Dave is a twin. Shocker, guys. The ex fiance was Dave's brother, Sam. So,
Oh, good
only
gracious.
joking. So yes, Dave. What about Eva?
Yeah. Yes. As soon as I knew she was the end of your question was really the when I knew she was the one. I suppose I would say literally, it is a bit of a cliche, but like that time I hopped into her car, like I do sort of remember being like, I'm pretty stuck here. you
So
know, you know, like I think this, yeah, and I suppose I've been going through my own journey of, of being single and things, and then as a Christian, there's a lot of pressure to find somebody and all that sort of stuff, and I had struggled with that, and like maybe over the years I had like gotten desperate, and you were like trying to push things that you shouldn't have pushed and do, and it was like silly, and I come to sort of a place of that surrender too, which is something if anybody out there is going through that, like you have to trust God, and there's something in that. And I remember talking to other fellows and things like that at the same time, and there's something in that. If you when you surrender and you're at peace, um, and just trusting God, that those things tend to fall into place in a strange way, and that very much happened for Eva and I, and
Mhm.
and that did just very fall like it fell into place very quickly, and we
Yeah.
clicked very very quickly in a very strange way, and
Mhm.
in many ways it was very instantaneous where we went out and like, I think we spent every day together for about 2 weeks. So with it, just without hardly even really knowing each other,
Yeah.
and our relationship grew very, very quickly, very, very fast. But it was something that you could feel God
Yeah.
in a sense. There wasn't you just knew that it was sort of just,
It was different.
it was just different.
Yeah.
To other relationships and other things, it was just different.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Uh, Me and you kind of chatted, whether it's a coffee or out for walks and things like that, about kind of leadership and responsibility as a husband, as a father, within marriage and in a family. Um, so, what has becoming a husband and a father really taught you about leadership? Do you want to unpack that one?
Yeah, I mean, like leadership is what it's one of these things. Like to be a good leader, you have to recognize that you're not perfect, and it's certainly none of us are perfect. And I'm first in that bandwagon. And to be a Christian leader, you need to be Christ-like. What is Christ? He's the ultimate sacrifice. He's selfless. And that's something I think as men that we probably need to understand is that in the list of priority, we come last. First is your wife, second is your kids, and then third comes you. And that's something that we all at times struggle with. Certainly me, with a newborn baby and with the lack of sleep, like I'm not like, at those points, I'm not particularly selfless. I want to sleep, and that's something I would, you know, you be aware of your own faults, and there's one of my faults right there. I'm, not particularly good without sleep, and I'm not at times I'm not very selfless. You know, but be a leader. It's interesting because I'm a leader in work as well. I run my own business and things like that as well, and even and that has its lessons as well of how to manage staff and how to manage people and how to manage different personalities. And it's all and all these things. The answers they're all found in the Bible, so they are, and they're all found through the person of Christ, and that we should be gentle and look to Him for guidance and be
Yeah.
selfless.
There's a really interesting scripture that talks about giving discounts to your friends. When
Double.
so yeah, Eva, you shared about how trust and security really deeply shaped your early family experience. So after hearing what Dave has said about kind of leadership and followerhood and things like that, how has seeing Dave as a husband and a father reshaped your understanding of trust and stability?
Um, I would say it's healed it. It's probably a better word. I think that I over like it took me a while, to kind of open up even with you with some wee things, because I was so closed off for so long, and that always did make me nervous. Like with can I trust somebody to not hurt me again, that kind of thing. And when it's God, it's different. God gave me somebody that literally would do anything for me. Like he is so selfless. Maybe not with the sleep, that's the only point. But yeah, no, in every way. Like I know I come first. Like I've never felt any different. I'm very spoiled like that, but I do. Um, so he's shown me that he's given me a person that I can trust with anything. But as I said, it's healed. It's healed everything. I for so long the three things I always remember thinking to myself that I was searching for was stability, peace, and fulfillment, because I and myself felt so unstable. The the man, the father, the husband is the head of the home, and although my mum was incredible, absolutely incredible, I don't want to knock her. You know, there's a reason God puts the man at the head of the home for a reason. And I missed that, so that obviously, made me unstable. And maybe if I had had him, I had a dad that was saved and had a relationship with Christ, I could have ended up completely differently and had a different testimony. With peace, I was so like didn't have any peace for a long time. I was just sad all the time. Even in good moments that, it kind of went back to reality. And I just was so empty. Like I created fulfillment in every, aspect of life so much. And Dave healed all those things by giving me a stable home, giving me a stable marriage, giving my son a stable father. He gave me so much peace with reassurance and support. And I suppose he fulfilled a gap because he brought Christ at the center of our home and our marriage. He is the firm foundation. And I remember the night that I cried on the Lord, like that was a song like I was listening to, and like that's just like the testimony of our marriage and our home. Um, but yeah, no, and I just I think he's just healed wounds I didn't know were still there.
Yeah, but that's just Jesus.
It is,
It's just Jesus because I'm not in any way, shape, or form perfect, and I'm not a perfect leader or a perfect husband, and none of us ever will be these things. And at times we all get it wrong. At times, I can get it irritable. I can get all of these things, and as can we all. And it's really just Jesus is the answer, and without him, you've nothing, but with him, you've got everything.
Yeah.
And when he is, and that's the challenge to us all, is to keep bringing him into our homes. And
Mm.
it's something I'm not perfect at. I certainly, even I'm not particularly, this is maybe a self help, but you know, I. I'm not very consistent with a lot of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. As a critique of me, like I should lead better in a more consistent fashion. But Christ is leading me in that as well,
Yeah.
and he's helping me to become a better Christian and a better leader as well. When at time we will improve those things, and we thank God that our marriage is going to get stronger as the year goes on. There's something I like to say, something my dad would put into me, we're going to get better and better and
Yeah.
better. It's okay, things might be perfect, and nothing ever is, but we're going to get better and better and better.
Yeah.
And that's what we're striving to do, keep getting more like Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And just to jump back to what you said earlier in the episode, that a good leader is someone who knows they're not perfect and instead they're imperfect. And that was beautiful, Dave. That really summed what leadership is. But yeah, and it's beautiful as well, Eva, seeing that come about within Dave, and there be a full arc, and a full
Yeah.
circle back
Yeah.
to your background, and then you've seen that being fulfilled within Dave. So that's amazing. Um, just I know we're coming to the end of the episode, but one more topic I want to chat to you about was worship, and you kind of alluded to it a bit, Eva. And I know worship has been a big part of your journey, um, but in very different ways, and across different seasons between you. Has worship played a part in your journey of rebuilding trust in God? And how has that looked?
Yes. I suppose whenever you hear the word worship, you just automatically think of, song, and it can take place in any way. But where it was so important to me in those early days of coming back to the Lord, sometimes I didn't really have words for a prayer, and that might sound a bit silly to some people. Um, but I had a real urge to talk to him all the time, especially because we were in lockdown. But I kind of remember always thinking like, I feel like I'm just saying the same thing again, but I've so much in my heart, like I want to say, but I don't know what those words are. And, I hadn't listened to worship music in a while, although saying that through those years, it was the one thing I did hold on to. Um, and it just, it was like my cry, you know, for instance, like it was whenever I didn't know what I'd gone through, what was being said, there was a song for my testimony, like my testimony. I love that. Whenever I felt really down, there was a song that like really described and like you know, made relevant my emotions, like that song, like "This Is How I Fight My Battles." I don't know if that's the song of it, but like that really resonated in moments. Or when I just wanted to worship, and like nothing else, just like surrender everything, hands up worship. There was song for that. I just felt like in those moments so thankful that God had really anointed certain people to put those words onto paper and bless us with them, because they blessed me and they allowed me, to bless God, to thank God, to give him everything whenever I didn't know how to do that. Um, and that really just carries through. I love worship. Like I really do. Like I overplay songs all the time, and it just clicks with me. It really sticks something in me. And as a mum, um, it's something that's really played now a part in my life where our son Art, like he's let's say like see my Sienna, so young, 14 months, can't really understand books. I know they can hear what you're saying, but like that's the one thing I find that he can connect with is worship. Like that song, that's how I praise and praise. Like that child lifts his hands up because he's copying maybe the videos, but like he's getting a moment of Jesus. Like, and then when I'm worshiping with him at that moment, like Christ's there. So it's powerful. It's unmatched. I just love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that's so good. And Dave, what does worship look like to you in this season of life?
I suppose I'm maybe going slightly off your question, but I was listening to a guy talk the other day, and he was sort of talking about as a fella in church,
and he was talking about, he was actually complaining about how there was too many worship songs and not enough of the word. And it really sort of got me thinking, like as a 32-year-old, I am aging, I suppose. I used to be more into the big, massive worship events, and maybe I'm not as interested or as interested as I used to be, but they still have their
Lack
place.
of sleep would kind of do that,
Yes,
man.
yes, it does. It does. But him saying that, it really got me thinking about what he was trying to say and maybe what I sort of disagreed with it about. And it was, he was saying as if there's a trade off between the word and worship, as if they're, and I was like, but are they different? What is the
Mm,
difference? Because worship songs that aren't based in the word are just songs.
mm,
So if we are singing worship songs, that is the word. And really good worship songs are full of the Bible and full of biblical truth and full of truth about who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And that's why it's so important. As important as corporate worship is really important because it is singing the word over us.
mm,
And it's those songs that get into your head, that get into your spirit, that people really, really know and get into. And that's why it's so important and why it has so much effect on people. And that we shouldn't shy away from songs and say they're not important, as though that aspect of our services is somehow just a bit emotional.
mm,
We should be emotional about biblical truth. We should be emotional that Jesus Christ died for our sins. And yeah, so worship is really, really important. This is something I was thinking about, that of how the word impacts your soul and into your spirit through worship songs. And that's why worship songs are so important to Christians.
mm.
Yeah, yeah. And is there one song that really means a lot to you?
No idea. There's a lot of what what song?
You love How Deep the Father's Love.
I take the Father's love, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I did
Yeah,
love, yeah.
yeah,
Beautiful song. Beautiful song.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
just to close off, guys, each of your stories have just been a real example of how God has moved, and not only in big ways, but also in small encounters and divine God moments, as you said, Eva. But Eva, looking back on everything that you've walked through, what would you say to the version of you that was struggling the most?
Um, I think I would tell her to be patient. Um, I think naturally I'm always somebody that wants things David will agree with this, done now, done now, done now. Um, and that's not always how God works. Um, I think as I've matured, I suppose everybody finds this out, at some point that um he's working in our waiting, and sometimes the wait is worth way more because of what the result's gonna be. Um and yeah, I would just, I think the main thing I would tell myself is that God has a plan, He has a purpose, and He has a promise, and it's for good. Um, and that He is good, that He is so, so, so good, and that life that you're trying to build for yourself is nothing because Jesus is life, and yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
Dave, what has God taught you through walking alongside Eva's story and through your journey in the marriage and fatherhood?
Eva teaches me stuff every day, so she does. Um, yeah. So Eva's taught me how to love and how to love truly. Of that love is consistent and love is daily. It is something massive that she's taught me and shown me. She's taught me that love is selfless, as I've said already about leadership. When you watch, as you'll agree, Mark, when you watch your wife with your newborn baby and them, caring for them and doing everything they can and pushing themselves to, beyond tiredness. And I think she talk about tiredness, but I'm missing 2 hours sleep, and I'm like an angry bear. Eva misses 4 hours sleep, and she's fine because it's that selfless love that a mother has for a child, and that is an amazing lesson to watch and to be witness to. That as a man, of course, I love my child more than anything, but a mother's love is something unbelievable. So it is, the role of the mother is you see women like they have careers, go for it and all that, but to be a mother is something exceptional. So it is, and Eve is an exceptional mother, and that's something she's really taught me is how to be so loving.
Yeah. Guys, it's been amazing, and thank you so much for sharing your story so openly. And especially to Eva, I know there's been some real trigger points and some real hard moments that you've had to walk through and step through with us on the episode. But it's just been incredible, and it's amazing to see how God has worked deeply in your hearts and in your life. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on. It's been
Thank you.
great.
you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Like and
Okay.
subscribe.
Like and subscribe.